Until Show Starcom Radio Network. What kind of voter are you? It's clear the nation is at a crossroads with less than 100 days, a lot less than 100 days till the election. The race is still neck and neck. I'm not going to say a virtual dead heat because Hillary pulled ahead in the numbers, but everybody expects these numbers to teeter-totter all the way through. Our guest is Jill Cody. And Jill says not all voters are the same, to say the least, right? To say the least. You turn on the TV and you go, who are they for? I can't tell. They're so angry. So, Jill, welcome to the show. What do we make of the voter in 2016, and how do we analyze this? What are the criteria for figuring out what we're up against here?
Well, first of all, Ed, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and your listeners. And, you know, the 2016 is quite exciting election, that's for sure. You know, I've noticed that everybody has been given the vote equally when we turn 18. It's a gift when we turn 18. But then we don't treat it equally. So I've been observing that there are really four voter types, four citizen voter types, and one that doesn't vote.
Okay.
And the four voter types I came up with was, the first was the courageous voter, and they're the ones that are, vote at every election. They study all the issues. They're activists. They participate in the electoral process between elections. They may even have their representatives and senators' phone numbers in their smartphones, so they just can push a button when they want to talk to the office.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's, I think most people are in the concerned voter area, that they are interested in politics. They don't stay as close to the issues, but they're open to them. They're open to learning, and they may occasionally reach out to their elected officials. And they also are a little afraid, I think, because there's so much political attacking happening that they're probably more private and don't want to make their voice known, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then we have the casual voter, who actually abandons their vote. They fail to vote in every election, or they don't vote the whole ticket. And there are actually people and strategies that want to suppress the vote, that want people to abandon the vote. They want you to think that it doesn't matter. And the only time it doesn't matter is when when you don't cast it.
Well, right. In other words, some of the people who have, and I want to mention your book as well. It's a great title, America Abandoned. Okay? The Secret Velvet Coup that cost us our democracy. Abandoning the vote was sacrilege when I was a kid. Sacrilege. I went to Catholic school. Everybody voted. But I certainly get it. It does look like a worthless system responding to no one but the rich and the super poor. I don't know what a middle-class family is supposed to have gotten from America in the last 40 years. I don't blame them like I used to. I go, you know what? Your arguments are great. They never talk to you. It's always the poor and the rich. We want more of the rich's money, these evil rich people. How dare they? And look at who died in the street today. And look who's got Zika virus, microencephaly today. So I don't know, where does a middle-class person fit? All they're doing is chiming in on the two diametric polar opposites here. What's in it for a family with 3 kids? Be honest.
It does sound, yes, it does sound pretty hopeless. However, the one power we have as an American citizen is our vote. And we play right into all of those negative forces when we don't vote. For example, in 1996, Taiwan became its first democratic republic. They had a 76% voter turnout. that year was a presidential election, and we had a 49% voter turnout. What would happen in this country if we had a 76% voter turnout? The only power we really have left is what I call shaming, shunning, and voting. And that is letting people know when our representatives know when we're unhappy with them. We had a huge success story with net neutrality. There were very strong corporate and powerful forces wanting to change the internet into a cable service, and people that could pay more would get faster service, and people that couldn't pay more wouldn't, or nonprofit organizations wouldn't. Mm-hmm. And the people just stood up, and they screamed, they petitioned, they called. They actually, what happened was they blew up the phones, and that's what they call it in Washington when the switchboard just can't handle the number of calls. And they completely changed the result. We now have protected net neutrality for a while. So really, it does seem depressing. It does seem hopeless. And the only way to turn it around is for us to get our power back and start to realize that those forces win when we don't vote and we're not active.
Well, let's talk about why Trump and Sanders are able to enter and engage those folks. They did bring something that the others have been sorely lacking in for the better part of 2 or 3 decades. I mean, I really think the last time America was excited about voting was during the Reagan vote. I think that was a great time in 1984 that people like, this country's on track, 49 out of 50 states, we have a consensus. But since then, George, the father, horrible disappointment, voted out. Clinton was, you still can't bring up Clinton at a dinner table in my family. Disgusting behavior. Personally, horrible person. No matter what he did, horrible person, punishing his family like that in public, his daughter, his wife, whatever. Then you have the pre-9/11 George W., who was interesting, was like a little cartoon character, want to have a beer with me, couldn't even speak the English language articulately. And then he was attacked on 9/11, chief executive, got himself back in, and here we are with another president, you know, the affirmative action president, the stranger. No one ever heard of a man, enters American public life, and in a couple of short years wins the presidency. Then has a horrible presidency for working people. I know in his office they think they're doing a great job. But you've got the slowest economy since World War II. You've got 90 million people who are not even in the work rolls anymore. And we got enemies blowing us up on our own land. So I get it. It's, you know, when you get underqualified candidates, it's miserable no matter who you vote for. However, Sanders and Trump offered something of a revolution. So what I see the passion for today is we want the thing torn down, and then we'll take our chances with a rebuild. So what do we do for those folks? Because they're serious. Whether they were at a Sanders rally and they were 21 or at a Trump rally and they're 61, they have no confidence at all in this, status quo, or the orderly continuation of the two parties that have been miserable for the past couple of decades. What category are they in?
Well, I think the Bernie Sanders voters and the Donald Trump voters are in different categories. The Donald Trump voters I put into the caustic voter category. You know, they're angry, they're reactive, they're vindictive, they're irrational, they are fed up. They go by the strength of the character of the candidate. They are really looking for an authoritarian answer. And I don't think the Bernie Sanders people, except the Bernie or bust people, I think the Bernie or bust people fit into the caustic one, because here are people that followed Bernie faithfully through the primary. And then once he said, okay, it's now over, we need to shift, we need to now get behind the nominee, then they don't believe him anymore. You know, they believed him all the way through the primary and they were his person. Then all of a sudden they don't believe him and become reactive and vindictive and irrational. And no one makes a good decision when they're in that frame of mind. No one. So when we talk about burning the place down, I live in California, and we have a big surf fire going on now, and I know that 57 homes are gone, and those homes are burnt down. And to me, it's like saying, well, I'm burning down my home because I don't like some of my family members in it. I'm sure when those people lost their homes, they've lost everything, and they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know what's going to come back, whether they're going to get what they had originally or whether it's going to come back better. And I just am very worried about people that want to just burn the whole thing down, that our forefathers...
Why should we worry about that? Our forefathers did say, tear it down if it's not working. So why isn't it time to tear it down? Just take this premise and tell me what's wrong with it. I'd love to know. Go ahead.
Well, I don't think they imagine the multinational corporations that we have and the extent of the billionaires that we've got. Because when you tear it down, you know, the ones with the money and the power are going to be the ones that rebuild it. I don't think they had a concept of what we've got today. So my concern is yes, we technically don't have a democracy right now. It is an oligarchy. And if we don't work within the system and recapture our democracy, and an oligarchy gets stronger, corporatocracy gets stronger, we might have a very different country. And for one, I'm not really prepared to just throw 240 years of our country away on a idea that maybe we'll get it back our way when we don't have the money in the middle class pockets. We don't have, we're not coming out strongly enough as voters to make a decision. You know, in 1978 there was 175 lobbyists. Today there are 13,000. So.
Well, now if that's not a burn it down argument, I mean, you know, I want to be clear. We're not saying burn down the government.
Yes.
We're saying everybody's fired. We're going to repopulate everything we can with people who have absolutely none of the stain of this failure on them. Are we going to lose some good people? Sure. But it's totally worth it for the extent of the corrosion that your figure points out. That's it. If there's 17,000 lobbyists, we lost this ball game a long time ago. We're losing 18-1, even though it's the seventh inning. We're not going to recover it by the ninth inning. It's loaded. It's set. It's rigged. You know, when Bernie and Trump use the same word, you start to say to yourself, this is probably true. Two opposite opinions seeing a rigged. And, you know, I like Hillary personally. I've interviewed her. But she is, to many, a co-conspirator in the rigging. That she's a rigger. She's the kind of person that fixes an election. She's the kind of person that lies straight away. I mean, this thing with the FBI is embarrassing. I have a lot of Democrats in my family. They can't look at her. She lied about that. But you keep asking her with more cameras, she didn't lie. So this is the kind of thing that I think makes people say, come on. Now they're not even pretending to behave well. They don't have to behave well. So, you know, what do we do with that? How do you get somebody to really vote in something they think it's not legitimate?
Well, I may be pushing a boulder uphill, but I want to try to, well, you can't make voting sexy. It's not that interesting, but I want to make it cool again. If we started to vote at the levels that we're capable of, if the cynical citizen who doesn't vote at all and throws their birthright away moves up to at least a casual voter or a concerned voter, if we got our voting rates up from 35% to 76%, we would get the country we wanted that you're talking about.
Well, isn't that right?
Those courageous voters need to start running for office themselves.
Right. Well, isn't that what Trump did in this primary? He turned out more Republican voters than Ronald Reagan ever did. You know, modern-day Republican success. He unleashed the disenfranchised, gave them very, I think, intelligently, rallies to go to. They want a rally. You know, what you talked about before, I'm a big believer in, but you and I both know, we're not even a democracy. We're a republic form of government like Rome. We believe not in everybody votes on everything. That's not the American system, never has been. You put up a legislature that represents on population. You put up another legislature that represents 2 per state. And then you have a split of power that's supposed to be a 3-way lever so that if the law is precedent, you can use that. If the people have desires, they have a place to have them vocalized, and then a reflective body in the Senate with a chief executive necessary to sign it. So in that kind of complex corporation, which America is, what are you going to do? Don't you have to streamline it? I don't know. It seems like if you get Trump or you had if Bernie was still in it, he seemed to be willing to do things like free college. Crazy, right? It's a crazy idea. Free college. Look at the cost of Harvard. Look at the cost of St. John's, where I went, and you're going to give this away for free. But he was swinging for the seats. That's what you do when you're a revolutionary, right? You present an ideal. Trump, on the other hand, is proving nobody's that important in government. Nobody's that good, and nobody's that important. We could live without all of them. We could change out 100 senators, change out the president, and nothing bad will happen because they're doing such a poor job. And he's demystifying. You know what he's really done? He's kind of taken away the reverence. Mr. Senator, Mr. Governor, please, these are people who are failing you. Don't be so nice. So, I don't know whether you go on the one side of redistributing all the wealth, or you begin again with, hey, angry people, come on in. You're finally welcome. Right? I mean, this is how you break a logjam of a republic rife with the lobbying and corruption that we've seen. I'm 60, my whole life. I don't remember one not corrupt White House since I'm a kid.
Well, it's true that we have a republic. In a republic, we elect representatives. But that still means that we elect representatives. We still vote, and we need to vote for serious and intelligent candidates. What Donald Trump has touched is an anger in this country, but is the anger going to be directed in a positive, compelling, and constructive way, or is the anger going to be in a vindictive and irrational, disruptive, and repelling way? And I'm worried that the caustic voters who want to burn the house down will not get, when it's rebuilt, what they think they're going to get. And taking a system that we have had for 40 years and have lost in the last 35, and that's what the secret Velvet Coup is all about. I start with Lewis Powell's manifesto in the 1970s. I think in the modern era, we've had a coup. And I named it after the Velvet Coup after the Czech Republic leaving the Soviet Union. I facilitated a meeting there, and I learned about their history, and they left the Soviet Union without a shot being fired. And I call what we've experienced a Velvet Coup because a shot hasn't been fired. But in the 1970s, it started with a Lewis Powell memo to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that said if corporations didn't get involved in politics, that they were part of their own destruction, and that they needed to start getting involved to get rid of regulations, tear down regulations because they get in the way of maximum profits. And the whole march for the last 35 years has been anti-government and anti-vote. And I think now we're realizing the ramifications of the coup. And people know that they've been left out, and the system's been rigged by the people who've taken over the country, which is the corporations and the billionaires. But I don't see the answer being another he calls himself a billionaire. I see if a billionaire gets into the presidency that the coup is over, because they see the world very differently than we do. They really believe that they're the only people in the world that matter. So I'm very concerned that we're not going to get anything close to what we think we would if Donald Trump became president.
Well, you know, this is a very tough thing about being an American, right? I'm sure there are people that didn't like Washington and didn't know what they would get there. I mean, you're not supposed to know what you would get, I think. I think that everybody who tells you that this is what they're going to do in elected office changes remarkably one day after they're sworn in. Because when you're in the front row at Yankee Stadium, you have no idea what that fastball is like. When you play a game with the Yankees, you're always astounded at how fast that fastball comes in. So, you know, I mean, we are still doing this kind of the old-fashioned way, right? You sit on the sidelines and you decide you want to get in. What we do have going on, though, notwithstanding Trump, is that we have professional politicians who spend their entire lives in public service, it's called, but they have no results for 25 years. I think that's Bernie's people and Trump's people would say, we haven't made it. Now, if you're a minority, if you're an aggrieved American, we've done plenty with grievances. Grievances dominate the news. Unhappiness, sadness, and tragedy dominate the news. Mm-hmm. But for ordinary families who haven't been victim of a terror attack, who don't have the Zika virus, who haven't had an ISIS neighbor, they're completely, as your title says, they've been abandoned. They have been completely kicked to the curb. However, they pay through the nose every time they gas up that car. They pay through the nose every time they pay sales tax. They're paying everywhere they go. If they live on the wrong side of a bridge, they're paying a toll. So they're being drained of everything they have. I mean, to tell them that a New Deal, right, in cards, where, right, when you got bad cards, you can answer, right?
Right.
I mean, right. How could they imagine it would be worse? They're really being tortured right now. I feel for them. And also the other thing, you know, I'm in this bracket now. I'm age 60. This is the first decade of my life. I know for a fact the country will be no better than I was born. I know that. I know it's as good as Trump says he will be. I know he's not going to change poverty, economic disparity, the population of the jails. All these things were on the agenda when I was 12. So, you know, you gotta be realistic, right? And say, how would I like it to be? Sure. But what is my reasonable expectation of what could change here? You know, probably a modest, modest at best. So those people have a quandary, don't they?
You said it when you talked about people being on the sidelines. I think people sitting on the sidelines has helped create the position we're in, too. I once heard someone say that they weren't going to vote because there weren't any exciting issues on the ballot. And I said to myself, this isn't a dinner menu. This isn't a pick or choose. This is a citizenship issue. And we can't sit on the sidelines. And our voter turnout rate for decades has been just devastatingly low, just non-democratic. People will be focused on their lives and focused on the issues and be concerned about how it affects them. And I feel for them too. I'm in that as well. I think one of the reasons I wrote the book is that if I didn't do something, I'd go nuts because of how terrible things have gotten.
Right.
Well, too many people have been sitting on the sidelines for too long. The cynical citizen that's thrown their birthright away, that they were given that gift at 18, they've abandoned their country. They feel abandoned, so they go, what's the use? But they play right into the hands of the billionaires and the corporations when they do that. Paul Ryrick, many years ago in the late 70s, said, I don't want everybody to vote. When people don't vote, we get our way. So there's been such a strategic mental suppression, say, telling people it doesn't work, your vote doesn't matter. And personally, I mentioned I'm pushing a boulder uphill, but I want to make voting cool again. I want people to think that their vote affects 320 million other people, and to start taking it seriously, because people sitting on the sidelines has helped create the situation we're in, the system we're in. People sitting on the sidelines. This is if we're not exercising our democratic rights and being heard and using our voice constructively, compellingly, then we get the system we've got today. But I don't think it's irretrievable. I have hope. I don't want to burn it down.
What is it based on, though? I mean, I'm not against hope, but I am against I'm against delusion. I am. I mean, you know,
yes,
right.
Yes.
So explain where you've got some good foundational items for hope with working the system as it currently exists.
Well, I think we mentioned Bernie Sanders. He's now has his website, ourrevolution.com. And those Bernie or bust people, I think they'll come around because of their passion. But the huge amount of people that supported him, he got into the race too late. A lot of the South had already voted. They didn't know him as well as they knew Hillary. But his movement is not over, and he's encouraging people not only to get active like I'm encouraging people. I hope to inspire people to move from they realize they're a cynical citizen and they've thrown and abandoned their vote, and that there are people that want them to do that they now start taking their power back and start realizing how powerful their vote is. And it represents 320 million people, not just them. And I think then there are those that are the courageous citizens that have already been part of the voting regularly, and activists. They start running for office, and we start putting up candidates that will vow to take care of the middle class, will vow to overturn Citizens United, maybe would vow to not make money, give money free speech anymore.
Well, yeah, but what if the other guys say they vow to overturn Roe versus Wade? I mean, is anybody going to live with a decision they don't like, or is everybody going to vow to undo the thing they don't like? Because to me, this is what's wrong with the current predictable orthodoxy. We're just playing polar ping pong instead of a guy like Trump, who at least is all over the map. I don't think he's a strict Republican. The night he was at the debate, and I forget which one, it was an early debate, and he argued he wouldn't let anyone die in the street for lack of getting into a hospital, no matter what. It was about, I'm going to get rid of Obamacare. What are you going to replace it with? He goes, well, whatever I replace it with, it's not going to be they can't get in. I'm not going to have Americans dying in the street. That is the kind of break with the orthodoxy. They used to call it ticket splitting when I was a kid. These two philosophies, I think, are endangered by people like Bernie and Trump. They deliberately walk away from the orthodoxy of the two parties. So if that's not the answer, I don't know that we're going to find people we completely can anticipate and know what to expect from, and they are going to be big reformers. The only big reformers I know in history are Martin Luther with his 99 Theses on the door there, and let's face it, we saw what happened to him. If you really want to reform in America, I don't know how you could possibly do it with the two institutions of Republican Party and Democratic Party. I wouldn't know how you could do that. If you can smash them up, then you say, well, you know what, we loosen all these bolts, and we take away that smooth connectedness that they all have to put everything down, then maybe you have a shot. So I don't know. How do you bring about reform with the status quo?
Well, what you're bringing up is whether the much larger question of whether we want a democracy or not. Because a democracy is a constant battle, there's always a dynamic tension between the two parties. There is always, it's always messy, it's never certain, and it is a constant, you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, I think.
Indeed,
democracy is a lot of work. It's not a lot of work to have an authoritarian. We see authoritarian regimes all over the world.
Well, wait, we're in an authoritarian with Obama. He changed the bathrooms. There was no vote on those LGBT bathrooms, right? There was no vote on immigration. I mean, you've got one. These executive orders are exactly what a dictator would do. No one thinks of dictatorship from the left, but all you got to do is go back 100 years in world history, and you'll find them everywhere, dictators on the left. So this is what I think ordinary people see. They're like, hey, all these things happen. He just writes them on a piece of paper and puts them into law. So
now,
the
you
current
do know
structure,
that George Bush wrote more executive orders than Obama has, right?
Well, absolutely.
I mean,
no one likes, but nobody likes George Bush.
Him out.
Right. Both of the Bushes, 41 and 43, neither are held in high esteem. So the arrogance of power, they're 100% guilty as the father, George Bush, 100% guilty as the son, George Bush. So you're right. You got a pox on Bush. In other words, I think this is important for people who don't get this to understand, but I think it speaks to who's angry today. Either party will steal, lie, and cheat. It isn't Democrats are good, Republicans are bad. This is the same low caliber of individual. And that the party differences are not what's key. The differences that really matter is what is the individual made up of? And this is what they love about Trump and Bernie. Trump is willing, even if it upsets people, to say, I'm not letting people in from Sharia law countries, period. They hate us too much. There was a big thing with the Nazis and the Japanese in World War II. You got to learn from history. You're not going to be able to pick them out at a distance. You got to defend your country. So, of course, he starts a big wildfire with that. Then Bernie, like I say, well, you know, he'll see a problem, and he'll say, well, don't worry about the education. You can go for free. And it's a sweeping thing. So, you know, I don't know how we would do better than these two if we really are going to save the system. If it's not from two personalities like that. But that's leadership, right? You can't wait for 320 million people to figure it out. You need leaders that understand people. Both of them did, right? Both of those guys knew, Trump and Bernie, they knew how the people they were speaking to felt. And they knew how to engender more of the same. No?
Well, I also think there's two other things in play here, which is what I call living in the red and living in the black. People live in the red are angry, they live with destructive and disruptive and repelling emotions. I see caustic voters like that. People that live in the black want constructive, creative answers. And both worlds are out there. Both mindsets are out there. It's which one do we want to predominantly live in? Now, I do not want to predominantly live in one that is angry and irrational and vindictive, and I think that is who Trump appeals to. It appeals to the fear-based emotional person. It appeals to our lower development, I guess is what I'd say. You know, it's easy to get angry. It's easy to be fearful. It's harder to try to think things through and fight those emotions and say, okay, what's the rational, positive thing to do here? So I see the Bernie people being constructive, wanting to work with the system we have, recapture what we've lost 3 decades ago